So I've been doing this electroculture thing for about 12 weeks now. The antennas are still in the ground, so it might be 13 or 14 weeks. But here are some things that you might want to consider before you get started doing this electroculture thing. So majority of all of this, as you see, is just dirt covering up what used to be the 23-foot section of corn. It's about maybe 4 or 5 feet that direction. Now the thing is, all of my electroculture experiment for this past few weeks have been mostly reliant upon that corn, simply because I get to see the most growth out of it, and because of the way it was laid out and set up, it was such a long enough space that I could clearly put an antenna on one side of it and see how it affected those corn stalks versus the ones on the opposite end of the bed. So for the most part, I've been putting other antennas in different places as well. I put some in the strawberry area, in my tomatoes, where my radishes were, some by the onions, and so on and so forth. But that main part of the experiment for the past 12 weeks has been mostly reliant upon the success of the corn. But if you can see, the soil underneath the watermelon is still moist. The main reason most of the soil is moist over here in this area is simply because of the wood chips that's been covering it. And not only that, but there were so many plants close together that all the leaves are shading out the majority of the soil and the mulch itself. So it didn't have much need for water, not a lot of water at least. And I was watering about every other day, but it came to some parts where I just didn't get around to the garden. So it was maybe taking about 3 or 4 days before the entire garden could get any type of water from me myself. But surprisingly, I had a couple rainstorms intervene on my behalf and pretty much took care of what I couldn't do. And the soil's been doing extremely well because of it, and the plants have been doing well. I didn't see any stress from any of them at all during the course of this 12-week trial. Now, had any of those plants been so separated as I see in most modern gardens, you have one plant here, the next watermelon plant is about 20-30 feet away, or say for the tomatoes, you have one tomato plant here, and about 14, 15, 16 inches away is the next tomato plant. You have all that ground that's just exposed. Of course, it's gonna dry up a whole lot faster. The roots are gonna try to stretch as far as they can to reach water wherever, versus if all the leaves are shading out the area, keeping the soil moist, as retaining the moisture in that area as well. If you kind of think about it as like a if you kind of think about it much like a rainforest, even just the canopies of all the trees that are collecting all the rainwater and dropping it close together and pretty much like pools in their general area. I was trying to mimic the same type of idea, the same concept, the same principles over in that garden as well with what I had. So one thing I have noticed as far as that entire season, this entire spring and summer season, when growing the tomatoes in specific, having these antennas near the plant, I've noticed less bugs. And I'm not talking about beneficials like ladybugs and butterflies and bees and stuff like that, because those are all necessary. If I seen that I didn't get any of them, then I would probably remove the antennas and see if they were to come back. But what I was mainly concerned about was things like aphids and cutworms and grubs and stuff that would eat at the roots of my plants that I've experienced before in the past. And I haven't had any of that at all this year, which I'm really glad. So if this whole antenna thing is preventing bugs from coming in, then by all means I'm probably do it again, probably on a larger scale, just to prevent it from reaching other areas, because I'm not sure how far out these antennas are effective. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can have an antenna here, but does it only affect the plants up to 2 or 3 feet away? If I make it taller, does it reach out further? That kind of deal. So that type of information I do not know or have for you. But what I will say, that from my own experience, from my own observation, is I didn't see many invasive or destructive bugs around here. Now, currently, because I'm growing watermelon and some of the leaves are yellowing and dying off because it's getting close to the end of the life of that plant, the squash bugs are coming, which I don't really care about. So I'm gonna more than likely remove those anyway, and probably just compost the plant material, the stems and the leaves, right back into the soil again. I don't see a point in removing them because it's not like the plant's diseased or anything. Oh, I also will say this as well. First time I've noticed that my corn was kind of brown. Like, some of it was super undeveloped and mushy, and I don't know, it could have been just some random disease because it was only maybe like 3 or 4 of them that had it, but I haven't noticed that in times past. It could just be from it getting a whole lot of moisture inside of the husk, and all of that was just sitting and pooling, and therefore it just didn't perform well. So I will say I've noticed that as well. During this spring season, this spring-summer season, when I planted the corn, right, I had an east end and on the west end, and I placed the antenna near on the west end of the garden bed, with it being the second batch. Because on the east end of the garden bed, I had my first batch of corn. Then maybe a few weeks later, I planted a second batch because I thought I was going to be doing some successive planting and successive harvesting. I really didn't do all that. I didn't have the time to do that. I've noticed over the spring summer 12-week period is that the west end that started later, even though I started it later, as far as greenery and height is concerned, it shot up like woo, it was just there. Versus the east end of the garden, it was consistent growth. And I'm not saying at any point was it so drastic that it was just like, yo, this has to be it. But what I noticed is that, yeah, while the greenery and the height of the entire corn stalks was just amazing, it didn't really affect the fruit size or the corn, the kernels and stuff like that, where you might be seeing it here on YouTube and on all these other videos where you got potatoes just yay big and pumpkins just like massive as God knows what. I have not seen any of that when it came to corn. The corn that I received was all pretty much like 13, 14 inches in length. The kernels was not any different in size from the other ones, even the ones on the east end of the garden bed. Even those kind of turned out maybe around 9-10 inches. Overall, it wasn't such a grandiose difference to make me say that Electroculture is doing what a lot of people are advertising is saying it is doing. So, greenery, it was looking nice, but at the same time, it was looking about as even. Like, you know, at first when it's all shooting up, the leaves are producing really fast, really big, but once the east end, the first batch started coming in and it was just getting there to maturity, it started looking all the same. So you couldn't quite tell if there was an antenna in the ground anyways, regardless. So with that being said, don't get your hopes up. Really don't. I wouldn't get my hopes up thinking that you're gonna get something really crazy out of the Electroculture garden. There's a few bonuses that I've seen, but not the main one that I was looking for. So this is what I have concerning the last of the drying corn. You can see there's some parts that didn't develop on it, but it was pretty much mostly dry by the time I harvested, so those just didn't get on. But I will be collecting the rest of that good old kernels for seed for some other time later. That's the rest that is drying out. This is what I have currently for what I collected. This is 1 quart size Ziploc bag full of just seed, really. I did have several ears of corn that I did eat on the spot when I was harvesting, and that was really nice. Not too many, simply because I wanted to keep most of it for seed for a later time to restart this process, and to do it for a different reason, because I wanted corn to be in my garden for the sake of grain, but I don't think I grew the right kind. So all in all, here's my final conclusion on the matter. Make sure your soil is right and attack this thing with as much joy and vigor as I did. I really want to see success. And if somebody finds out the secret to such big plants as I've been seeing all over the internet, let me know, because I need to figure that shit out. But with that being said, I will now post the final heights of all the corn, not all the corn, geez, but if each division of corn that I did get from the garden this year, because I did say I would measure the heights of the tallest one from each section.